most important things about undertaking a drum recording is having some drums that sound good. Now, for a lot of you, you're going to bring in a drummer, and the drummer is going to be knowledgeable about their drums. They're going to have bought their drums specifically for their sound. They're going to love their drum. They will have tuned their drums. But I mean, it's a horrible generalisation. I don't necessarily think it's sort of quotable, but I swear, I don't know, 4 out of every 5 drummers that I see haven't got a clue how to tune their drums, and actually be very, very glad of a drum tech to help them out with achieving the sound that they're looking for. So today we're going to have a brief look at tuning drums. Anyway, drum tuning and looking after drums and general drum maintenance. I have my Remo box here. A drum has three essential main components. The shell, and we're going to look at snares in different materials. I've got 2 frosted bronze snares of different depths. We've got a steel snare, we've got a maple snare, and we've got a birch snare. The maple snare's got wooden hoops on it. So we've got quite a range of different snares to look at today. We might even go grab this, and we've got another maple snare that's got metal hoops. There's all sorts of snare drums that we have in the building between us that we just thought we'd bring up, because again, it's about more than this. You know, you might go, I'm going to record guitar, and every time you record guitar, you don't record the Yamaha Pacifica into an Epiphone amp, do you? You go, oh, actually no, for this track, I want my Les Paul, or I want my SG, or I want my Strat, or I want a more twangy tone, so I want to go for a telly. You know, you make a choice of guitar when you're picking your guitar. It should be exactly the same with the snare drum. The snare drum should be a really important part of driving the track. And in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to have a listening session where we just go through track after track after track, just exploring the snare drum tones that we're looking at. Some of you will already know this, but in terms of heads, one of these has been decorated, but don't worry about that. You effectively have 2 heads. One sits on the front, which is the batter head, which you can hear is much thicker. In this case, it's coated. This is a snare drum, one used on a snare drum. It's a Remo coated ambassador, which is a very, very common skin for a drum. But this ambassador is made in China rather than made in the USA. It doesn't say made in USA on it. They don't sound the same. They don't sound nearly as good. This is the resonant head. Now, it's only really a snare drum where you would tend to have 2 skins of different thicknesses. And again, one of the reasons why this is so thin is because it actually has to, well, 1, it's resonating, but 2, you can actually see, I don't know if you can see in the light, the indentation of the snare wires on here. The thinner that head is, the more it's going to excite the snare, so the more snare is going to be involved in your sound. So again, your choice of resonant head, even once you've chosen your snare, your choice of resonant head is going to dictate how much snare you've got in the sound. So you can start to see this becomes quite tricky. So anyway, don't use these horrible batter heads these horrible resonant heads as a batter head. Make sure you use a batter head. And again, if you see that the coating is missing from the drum, if there's indentations in it, it's due a change. If you've got a really, really important recording project on, maybe it's one that's billed. You know, for example, I know a lot of engineers who will actually, included in the price, will be fresh drum heads for the session and a hard drive at the end with all of the files on it. And they build it into their session price. So why not just go the extra mile and make a little bit of effort? Well, let's start with this horrible steel drum. Steel drums often cheap. This is an example of a Tama Rockstar steel drum that came with the actual drum that we've got on there. And this again has got a Remo Weather King coated ambassador from a Black Panther on it. Lots of ring on this particular snare. That'll be fine. Sounds pretty damn horrible. So the snare is the only drum where you've got effectively different skins on top and bottom. What I want to do is I want to get my resonant skin, and I'm going to aim for that A, which is where I'm going to go for. So let's have a little tap around the drum and see where we're at. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tune this up. And what I tend to do is I'll tend to tune up opposite. So I'll go from there to the opposite, tweak on that, miss one out, there, to the opposite, across from there, the opposite, there to the opposite. Once I've got them all roughly the same, I can just go around in a circle. The reason why I put the stick in here, by the way, is to stop the snare from vibrating. And I'm muting the bottom hand, often worth tuning this on a towel or something, so you can mute the top. Let's have that A again. Sorry, Al. Another trick, if you're trying to get this one up, pull up the opposite one. So that was a little low. Pull up the top of it. Still pull that one a little low. Pull up the top of it. And if like a on the top.
Hold the drum.
Gotta get a crank on this now. Pull this one up. I have a thing for tuning drums high. It's not good. I apologise already. You sometimes have to drop it quite a long way and then come back up. It's hard to tune down. I swear this drum's just balked. That's quite really low. Pull up the opposite a bit. The problem is if one of them's high, it's going to pull the overtones up, so you're going to get that wah wah thing with the ring. Horrible. Possible bloody drum. Should start with a good drum. Right, a little bit more in tune now. Now, if you need to reseat heads on a drum, again, same score. Make sure it's seated properly on the drum. Pick your pitch and go. And I say with a snare drum, I quite like a kind of a major third between my top and my bottom head. Toms, I tend to tune the same. And then if I want like a lower frequency resonant, I'll drop the bottom head, and if I want it to feel often, top head to feel. But there are online guides you can have a look at. On a snare drum, you've got a strainer on the side. If you're recording and the snare is on in the room, nothing worse than your recording being affected by that whole kind of this. Can you hear the snare just chattering away? I'm sure you've recorded guitar amps before, and there's some weird chattering going on in the studio. It's like just with a snare strainer on the side. The snare itself, very, very simple system. You've got the strainer there, which hangs onto this snare wire. Snare wires, again, if you see kinks in the snare wires, these gaps here, that's not good. Because the snare wire is pretty much at the end of its life. Some of them look absolutely terrible. The one on that Yamaha yesterday was ridiculous, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, there were bits where it was sticking up and they were knotted and twisted. It's not going to give a good consistent snare sound. In this case, it's a piece of plastic. Sometimes they use ribbon, and it's just gripped on both sides. So you put it in place, again, making sure it's in the middle. Sometimes you'll have a drum that sounds choked. You hit it, there's no snare sound in it. And that's often because the snare is too tight, or if the snare is off-centre. If you imagine it, like the snare is all the way over here, it's actually clamping on the edge and stopping the actual shell from resonating. The whole thing about this is it's supposed to resonate. So there we go, that snare is in the middle. Now let's see what we've got. That sounds immeasurably better than it did like 3 minutes ago. It really has come along a little bit, but still, you can hear it ringing. Quite a nice little bite to it now compared with before. Before it was unusable. It's got quite a nice. This room actually is quite good. For all its horrible. These things are a bit kind of 1980s. Effectively, they clip onto the snare, and you've got a little bolt on the top that pushes this pad down onto the snare. If you've got severe ring, and you want to kind of deal with it, sorry, it can help, but it can completely murder the snare or the drum. I actually find it can be quite useful on a floor tom, or if you want a resonant side of the floor tom, you really want to kill the resonant head, where other products will fall off. But now it's got no ring at all, but it's got quite a nice snap actually. Interesting.
On some old snares you'll find them inside.
Yeah, sometimes you've got like a little thing on the side, you twist it and it actually pushes it against. This is also your friend. This is moon gel. Moon gel is weird blue sticky stuff. Really quite strange. So here's our snare before. Little piece of that on the edge. But it's still got some length. I can put a second piece, in fact you can put half a piece on. So I'm just going to do a half piece now. It's an abusive snare drum this. Or you can go crazy with it and you put like 2 pieces on. Wow. 4 pieces on. It's also brought bottom end out of the snare. Got a lot more bottom end now, so I've completely rechanged the tone of this snare. Moon gel is not cheating.
You got a wallet on you?
I've got a wallet on me. That's in there, but here we are.
Motown.
Motown warmth. Hear the warmth in that drum right now? That's crazy how good that sounds. And that's a steel drum. The thing about steel is it's kind of shouty, kind of ringy, a little bit out of control, but quite bright, quite open, quite balanced. Kind of everyone's first drum really has that kind of steel sound. So let's move now to a slightly different sounding metal. We'll go for, in fact we'll go for quite a crazy drum, for my newly labelled drums. So this drum is made of what's called phosphor bronze. It weighs a flipping ton. When you actually look inside it you can see why, it's just a huge chunk of solid bronze. And you'll notice with this one it's got a massive snare wire. It's got a lot of strands, a 42 strand strain on, 42 strand snare on there. So it should be really snarey. It also has an Evans Hazy 300, I mean listen, 1, 2, 3, 4, can you hear it buzzing straight away? It's got an Evans Hazy 300 on there, which is a very, very, very light head. And the thing about a light head is it transfers into that snare wire, makes it incredibly sensitive. But you might go, well, why have I got this phosphor bronze instead of the steel? Just to remind you of the steel again. Hear the trash in that. Colour, oh God, it sounds good. If you rimshot it, it's bonkers. Wah! Earplugs for drummers, honestly, I'm putting myself in danger here for you guys. If you go to the edge, so you can see immediately an amazingly different colour for that drum. Completely crazy sounding. Now I'm thinking, one of my favourite drum sounds ever has to be the snare from Teenage Dirtbag. I don't know if anyone remembers, it goes boom, boing, boing. It's mental, absolutely mental. You can tune this drum to do similar things.